What's up, everyone? So I am back with Brandon Kamin, and the reason why I say back is because he actually featured in one of my videos previously where we were showing off his line of work, and if you haven't checked that out, you should definitely go and check it out. But also, he's the one who did my intro video for me, so
You still use that?
yeah, I actually
Oh,
do.
cool.
Yeah, it's the first thing that people see. What's up, everyone? My name is Denzel.
Yeah.
Mensah. We had to do so many takes for that because I'm not used to using the script, as you guys know. But anyway, this isn't about me. This is about Brandon. Brandon is an INTP, and he's also my roommate. And we get along very well, right?
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I would say that Brandon's a very great roommate and everything, so I really appreciate him. We are here to talk about how he as an INTP relates to the INTP. So, first things first, how would you introduce yourself or tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, hi. I am Brandon Kamin, as Denzel just introduced. Well, I am a person who is in my mind a lot, for sure. I have my own little world inside my head. I'm definitely more focused on that than I am generally focused on in the real world. Doesn't mean I completely ignore it or don't pay attention to it, but I'm a very imaginative, very creative person. That is my basically passion in life, is to create. Ever since I was just a little kid, I would write comics and draw and write stories, and I still do that a lot today. I've managed to get a lot of training and hands-on equipment that's allowed me to push that into videography, which is now my passion and part of my career right now, hoping to make it my permanent career one day. Just recently engaged.
Whoop,
So,
whoop. Yeah.
Piss
yeah.
proud for being engaged.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And I am engaged to a ISTJ.
Yep.
And she
Y'all get along great, though.
Yes.
From what I see, y'all get along.
She
very
is
well.
just the sweetest person in the world, and she brings joy to my heart every time I'm around her. So we are very happily preparing for the big day.
Awesome.
I love to travel a lot. I haven't gotten the chance to travel a lot because right now I'm a poor, helpless college student. But one day I'm hoping to get out there and see the world.
Absolutely. Before we get into all of what entails of the INTP, I would like to mention a few very well-known INTPs, which are Abraham Lincoln, Albert Einstein, Dexter, actually both of them, Dexter from Dexter's Laboratory and from the show Dexter.
Love that show.
Neil Peart, Felicity Smoke from Arrow, Peter Parker from the first Spider-Man series with Tobey Maguire, James Holliday from Ready Player One, Parmenides, Sheldon from Big Bang Theory, Jordan Peterson, Charles Darwin, Brian from Family Guy, Neo from The Matrix, BT from Hunger Games, Reed from Criminal Minds, Sherlock Holmes from the BBC show, John Locke from Lost, Milo Thatch from Atlantis, Tina Fey, Kant, Harold Finch, Luna Lovegood from Harry Potter, and Qyburn. Hopefully I said that right. As you guys can see, those are just a handful of well-known INTP out there, and even House is actually, like, I know a lot of people like debate, like, no, he's definitely INTJ, but from credible sources I hear, he could be NTP, ENTP, or INTP, but I don't watch the show, so I'm not going to throw that one out there, but just in case if you guys want to discuss that in the comments, you can go ahead and do that. Anyway, all of these people, even though they may behave differently or they may behave similarly, they're still INTP, and this is because the thing that they all have in common, regardless of whether they behave similarly or not, are their cognitive functions, their mental processes. Every type has 4 cognitive functions, and this isn't the dichotomies with the E versus I, N versus S, F versus T, J versus P. No. Cognitive functions are mental processes that Carl Jung actually identified in the human psyche. And your dominant function is your strongest one, the one that you live in, and then your auxiliary function, your second strongest, and pretty much goes down from there. So for the INTP, I'll be stating both the actual term and the shorthand term, and then what Personality Hacker refers to it as, just so that you guys get a better picture. The INTP's cognitive functions are introverted thinking, TI, also known as accuracy, extroverted intuition, NE, also known as exploration, introverted sensing, SI, also referred to as memory, and then extroverted feeling, FE, also known as harmony by Personality Hacker. So today we're going to be discussing how Brandon relates to these cognitive functions, and hopefully by the end of the video you guys will get a better view, a better gist of how the INTP actually operates. And I would actually go as far as to say that Brandon is probably one of the most healthy INTPs I've ever met in my entire life, and we will see why. And I'm not just saying that, to gas him or, to hype him up or anything, but I genuinely believe that I've met a few INTPs, both in person and online, that I'm not really but Brandon, I really do enjoy his company, and we have never had any problems. And I see how he operates with other people, and yeah. So Brandon, going off of what we just talked about and everything, and even your look into the MBTI and everything, how would you define TI, accuracy, and how would you say that you relate to it?
Well, best way probably to explain that will probably be with some examples, once I can think of them. But it's basically, you want to be right, and a lot of my life is just, you want to be right, and it's not because of a prideful thing. It's like, oh yeah, I want everyone to see me as right. It's because you just want to be correct about, and you want to know how things work and how things around you function. It's kind of just, I know a lot of examples of where I debate people all the time, not necessarily because I'm trying to fight them, but I love to debate because I get to see the other side, and it helps me really just hone in on what is the answer to this inquiry that I'm trying to find out about. Another way of thinking, because I always thought, as an INTP, what is my one pet peeve, or almost even a fear, and that's ambiguity. I don't like ambiguity. I like knowing what something. That's why I cannot stand when election season comes around. You have two completely different sides, and they have two different perspectives, and there's an element of seed of truth in both sides, but there's all this clash. It's just well, which side is right? Which side is and it's just really hard because both sides do present interesting things to think about. So I mean, I do have an allegiance to one side. Not that we're gonna get into the politics in this video, but there's a lot of times where you listen and you're just kind of I don't know. I want to know. I want to know what's truly right here. And so
no, that's very interesting.
Ambiguity it irritates me a lot. Yeah. So and the trying to get away from that state of ambiguity, I feel like that also kind of ties into what is accuracy. And
that's a really good answer. And I have accuracy in my backseat as my inferior function, but I heavily relate to that. So real quick, accuracy, the way that I defined it, was concerned with understanding how things work, and accuracy takes in a plethora of information and extracts biases and emotions as much as possible to get the raw data and examine it. Loves to pick things apart to their simplest forms to fully grasp the mechanics of an idea, principle, or object in the most objective manner, and be capable of applying that information elsewhere whilst continuing to keep the other information stored pure and consistent. People who have this function can sometimes appear cold and detached. So it's very interesting that Brandon brought up, like, the election season and everything. Who did you vote for? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just totally
Myself. I didn't win.
I have accuracy as my inferior function, but I heavily relate to that because, and accuracy and harmony always come together. So TI and FE, introverted thinking and extroverted feeling, they come as a pair. And if you guys want to learn more about that relationship, like on a deeper level, then you can check out my cognitive function axes video. But the reason why I think that was interesting is because, just like I said over here, introverted thinking wants to extract as many human biases from it as possible. When it looks at stuff like the political debate, then it's looking at, okay, who is right? Regardless of how my mother feels, regardless of how my sister feels, regardless of how my girlfriend feels, regardless of how even I feel, looking at these ideas for what they are in an unbiased way, regardless of how it's going to affect people, who is right, what will be the best decision. And even if you may not like a person, you still want to know, okay, you won't allow your dislike of a person to pollute their thought process. If you agree with something of theirs, then you agree with something of theirs. While some people, they see you as, oh, I don't like you, so then they kind of throw you into that whole box. TI users are usually the types of people who they can separate, oh, I don't like you, but I can still respect the thoughts that you have. I can still respect your logic behind it. And so as a TI user, Brandon, as he said, it's just wanting to be right. TI users are also very good at naturally catching the inconsistency in logic. So just like I said, they like to break things apart to their smallest forms before they're able to then, that's their way of understanding it. Me having TI as my inferior function, one of the most successful things that I've ever done that I can remember is, and I've only done it once, I built, remember those Bionicle things? Yeah, I built one of those for the first time when I was younger, and I was so happy, and I did not want to break it apart again because I usually hate breaking things apart to their smallest form and all of that, and then putting stuff like that. But then I met a few ENTPs actually who they love doing stuff like that. And then when you meet ISTPs and INTPs and stuff like that, they usually especially with the STPs, they like to physically break things apart. NTPs can do this too, but they like to physically break things apart like cars or whatever, so they can understand how all of the components in the system work together. Now with NTPs, they're usually more about this when it comes to logic, or when it comes to the more abstract, which is going to become a little bit more when we get into the second function of exploration. I have a story about that pertaining to Brandon. But yeah, they usually look for that consistency and to be able to see okay, does this add up? Does this make sense to me? And just, I like what you said too, it's not about oh, well, I just want to be right for gloating purposes, but it's more so I just want to know what the accurate information is. Mm-hmm. And if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, but I'm happy because now I know what's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's actually interesting. I didn't even think about this, but I really related to that part when you were reading it off about bringing it down to its simplest form. Another word for simplest is primitive. We were actually discussing about dreams and how we interpret dreams, and remember what I said? Yeah. Find what the primitive emotion is in that dream and to interpret it. We don't have to get into dream interpretations, but other examples that's why I'm fascinated with the field of psychology. I've never pursued that because I'd be a terrible psychologist, just being honest. Accuracy. But I think psychology is really fascinating because a lot of times, there's people come with all this anger, all this hurt, all this sadness, and it's well, yeah, we can focus on that, but we got to figure out what is the root cause of this. What is the primitive cause that's going behind this? You got to go past the surface and really deep and find out what is the seed of all this.
Got you.
And
yeah.
Where did it start? Primitive is actually PRIM is I think the Latin root for first. It's the same thing we get primary, primordial, prime, just in general. And it basically means first. So where did all this begin, and why? And everything stems out into this big complex cluster of whatever, and this can be applied to so many things. We have to go by, I usually try to go get past all those roots, all that cluster, find where that starting point was, that seed.
That makes incredible sense. Can you guys see why, honestly, I just love INTPs? I interviewed Ben on my channel when we were talking about intellectual superiority. He's an INTP, and the reason why me and him even became friends was because when I used to work coincidentally here in the library, then he brought up a book about, like, and it was on apologetics and everything, which we are also going to get into. But he brought up a book, and I was like, oh, wow, like, you're into this or whatever. He's a philosophy major. And I was like, I can learn from you. And so ITPs in general, especially, they usually just have, like, such a well of information. And I just love to just sit there and be like, yeah, like, primitive, like, everything that you just stated. The auxiliary function of the INTP is extroverted intuition, NE, also known as exploration. And the way that I defined this function is concerned with abstract concepts, theories, as well as coming up with and exploring possibilities by looking at what has already happened or what is already established, tried, and true. Can appear like a triangle stemming from one idea and then birthing many different ideas to find patterns, underlying principles, and ideas for frameworks and theories as they talk, write, or create. Can seem over-idealistic and dreamy-like. So Brandon said at the beginning of this, like, how he just loves to, like, create, and, as you know, like, he's a videographer. And NE, there's every function, just understand there's, like, so many different faces to it. And even in my perceiving functions video and my judging functions video, where I try to, like, dive in deep about, like, how, like, all of these functions, like, relate and everything, I possibly still did not even cover all the faces, especially since I've learned so much more from that point. But NE in its best form is essentially exploring territory. I like what Antonia Dodge actually said one time. She said that NE is kind of like when you play video games and you see, like, there's, like, a grid on the map, but you don't really know, like, what exactly is there yet until you go out and you explore it, and then you're like, whoa, look at all of this. And now it's no longer, like, just a grid on that map, that unknown area, but now you actually have, like, a filled in spot of that. And so as an INTP, Brandon said that he spends a lot of time in his head, but when he's taking a break from spending time in his head, then he's actually going out into the world so that he can gather more information to be able to fill more, like, with his head, and then whatever that he's dissecting in his head with his TI, then it's pretty much NE is what brings is what brings TI the stuff to, like, sort through and fix through. How would you say that you relate to NE, and how would you even define it in your words?
I mean, I feel like I relate to everything you just said. I mean, basically the way you described it. It's going to be harder. I'm having a harder time putting that into words. I mean, the first thing that comes up was shower thoughts. Everybody knows about shower thoughts. It's basically, you can solve the world problems in the shower. I mean, it's just the time when you're in your mind and you're thinking. But, like, when you say create, like, theories and go out and kind of, like, explore different possibilities, that's basically a lot of my life. I just go out, and it's also, I think, my learning side, because I gotta admit, I love to learn. I guess that's why we're known as the more nerdy types, right? But I love to learn. I love to, if it wasn't for deadlines and certain weird policies, I probably would absolutely love taking classes. I mean, but the fact is, I enjoy what I learn and what I get when I'm taking classes. Like, I'll literally be, reading, we're doing research for a paper or something like that, and then I'll come across something like, oh, wow, I never knew that, and I'm like, wow, that's fascinating, and then it gets added to my pool of knowledge, and I see everything coming forth into, like, one big, complex theory. So I don't know if that's really relating a lot to my exploration side or not.
It definitely
it's what made
does.
me think.
Yeah, no, it definitely does, especially related with your accuracy side as well, your TI. So one of the things that I was actually going to mention was recently we were out with a couple of Brandon's friends. One of Brandon's friends, who is also an INTP, brought up the question, if you were to be bitten by a werewolf, a vampire, and a zombie at the same time, what would you turn into first? Now we had, I don't know what the other guy's type was. I'm guessing maybe ISFP. He just like tuned out. Like he was like, okay, like I don't really like this is like complicated because. But then Brandon leaped on that, and from what I remember, he was like, hold on. We have to actually like figure this out because see now we're dealing with science versus magic, and magic is going to trump science. And so he literally started doing all of these like equations, like so. Then if we're do you remember what you said?
Oh,
Actually?
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and explain it. You'd probably do it way better than I would.
I mean, there's a lot of assumption there because obviously there's vampires are not things we have seen in real life and have studied, but like vampires is portrayed in like typically movies. I just go back to the simple 1900 dead Draculas, when who is clearly like they're more of a supernatural force, and zombies. I mean, I'm going to again basic. I know there's been so many different versions of zombies in the world today, but I'm going back to the original where it was some kind of scientific experiment gone wrong. So I believe, and then I don't know about werewolves because I don't know too much about them. Are they magic? Are they science? Are they some combination of both? Are they just some weird nature or cosmic force? But ultimately, I think magic, as we would see in there, is a force outside of the world as we see today, which would be outside of science, because science focuses on what we know about the world that we live in. Since magic is completely independent from that, magic, or whatever the supernatural force that the vampires get their power from, would ultimately not be affected by the scientific cause of whatever made him a zombie.
Wow.
So that
Yeah.
this thing. So a vampire's supernatural force would ultimately not be affected by that.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just a really just brief thought I was having. I mean,
that was a brief thought that he was having, guys. Crazy part about that was that most people would just be like, oh, well, I'd be a vampire because, whatever, but he actually tried to, like, dissect it and make, like, look at all of what he knows about each of the three and then make it coherent. And this is literally strong TI accuracy with NE. And that's why, like, when it comes to, like, NTPs, especially INTPs in my opinion, when it comes to stuff like multiverse and everything, if they're the ones who are like creating it, so like I'm pretty sure that if Brandon was to create like a video based off of like the multiverse and like time travel or whatever, that would be the most coherent thing. And then when they watch certain things with time travel and multiverse and all of that, and we've done this too, like they can quickly spot like, well, this doesn't make sense, like maybe some other people would be like, oh, well, they're just enjoying it. But then he's like, no, but if this was to actually happen, then that means that would have affected this in the timeline and blah, blah, blah. And that doesn't really make sense. And this is incoherent. And, and they dissect all of what is abstract and what is conceptual to be able to still have it making sense. And then imagine when they bring this into the real world as well. Well, some people don't always believe, in like, we're both Christians, so we both believe in God. But Brandon, you had mentioned how you used to take philosophy, and you also used to look into apologetics and everything. What's your relationship with that?
Well, I actually used to be part of the apologetics club here on campus, which is great club. And I've watched many debates between famous atheists and famous Christians and stuff like that. And I actually really enjoy those debates because,
Same.
and I'll hear the atheist actually really get into it, and I'll think, wow, what he says makes sense, and just like, oh, is the atheist right? But then the Christian will come back and he will say his points and say, well, this doesn't make sense. So, and then I'm like, oh wow, that does make sense. And then in the end, they go back and forth, and debates aren't meant to be necessarily won; they're meant to be discussed into open discussion. Yeah. So I don't believe in a winner or anything like that. But basically, apologetics is giving rationality to what you believe. It's not blindly believing. Oh, mommy and daddy grew up teaching me to obey the Bible, and which nothing wrong with that. I'm not trying to like nail on people that grew up like that, but I personally, as an INTP, I want reasons for what I believe. I don't want to just say, "Mommy and Daddy told me to read the Bible," which was kind of the case growing up, and when I got out into the real world and I started talking to people and that did not hold up with my beliefs, I discovered, wow, I don't really have a good base for what I believe. And I looked at myself and I'm like, I don't really have a good perspective where I'm coming from here. And so that what got me in apologetics, and like, I want to be able to rationally explain what I believe.
Wow. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's good. And once again, even as an accuracy inferior person, that's actually why I got into apologetics and philosophy and everything too. It's not as quick or easy for me because of the breaking down of everything. It's kind of difficult. Like for me, I'm not able to. The way that I can stay logically consistent is when I'm in my NI, my perspectives, because then that's when I bring up metaphors and everything, which will explain my point, as opposed to just explaining things from like a purely logical standpoint. That's when I'll start messing up. But if I'm like, let me just throw out this metaphor to explain it, then all of a sudden like that's where like the logical sense will like come in, and you'll be able to understand like where I'm coming from, because I'm not able to systematize nearly as well as you are. And then there's a flip side to the coin of that, which we're gonna get to when we get to your flip, which is harmony, which is my driver, and then your 3-year-old. But all that he just explained is like a very, very, very strong example of TI and NE, that accuracy and that exploration, like exploring the world and seeing all that, and then seeing, okay, does this make sense to me? Is this coherent? Is this consistent logic and everything? And you're just always still searching for like what is right. And even then, I love how you said that it's not necessarily like to like come out on top, but it's more so to pretty much just understand like where the other person's like coming from, and like open up discussion, which I think is a very harmony accuracy type of thing, as opposed to with TJs and FPs. A lot of times they do want to, like, in my opinion, from what I've seen, they want to like debate to come out on top. Like if you're dealing with like an ETJ, oftentimes, and they're trying to like debate you so that they can win, even if some of their stuff could be wrong. While like when you're dealing with like a TP, and they may debate you, sometimes they may even play like devil's advocate and everything, but it's more so just to like get more perspective and everything, as opposed to like, oh, I actually want to win. They want to just like know what's right. And not saying that FIT users do not always want to know what's right, but usually because they're dealing with like inside how they feel, rather than like the actual like logic and everything of it, then sometimes like that can become like a little bit like convoluted. But then again, that's a discussion for another day. We've been watching Black Mirror lately. And I'm actually very happy because I introduced him to Black Mirror, which I think that is a show that every NTP would just love. And so far we've watched a couple of episodes. What would you say is your favorite one, and why would you say it? Why would you say it's your favorite?
Well, the first one I saw would easily be the favorite. I mean,
US
the other
Callister.
two, those other two were interesting, but I think that one really had the most kind of like discussion that could have been had behind it.
Which was interesting because the main character in that one was also INTP.
Yeah.
So you guys should definitely go check it out. And we're probably going to spoil a few things for you right now, so maybe you want to pause it. And then I'll put a description, and when we stop in the description, I'll tell you like this
Sure
the
thing. We put our
timestamp.
hands up when we're talking about spoilers, and then
Exactly. Yeah. So I'll put a timestamp of when we've stopped talking about it, where you can skip to it. But yeah, go ahead.
So what am I saying about it?
Oh yeah.
It brings up just a really interesting moral debate, and it's actually something I did for an assignment for a philosophy class for another TV series, coincidentally, Star Trek, which US Callister was based off of. What defines consciousness, and if a being, artificially created being, whether it be like a robot or a digital projection, which I believe was in the US McAllister, even if they seem like they have consciousness, they're still just artificial creations. and do they have rights, and should they be treated as human beings?
Mm.
What I said about that, the show really portrays it, and they don't really clarify whether they are actual conscious beings or not, because this is in the future. I don't know exactly what technology we're dealing with in that show, but like, they certainly portray him as conscious beings, because even when he has the program off, they're still talking and they're still like creating conversation. They still have emotional like attachments to things.
Mm.
So it seems like they are conscious beings. But in the end, it doesn't really matter whether they're conscious beings or not, even if they are just artificial projections. Why would we want to project negative or harsh or negative actions upon them? Why would we want to, like, sorry, I have a hard time finding the best language to explain things, but
No
like,
problem.
why do we want to disrespect the human image in that way? Why would we want to, even if they're just mental projections or creations, why do we want to like torture that? Like, how different is it, and this is the way I explain, how different is it if I just got like a doll of, you know, my manager or something that I was mad at, and I went home and I just took a knife and started stabbing it? It's just a doll. The doll's not getting hurt or anything like that. The doll doesn't really have rights or anything like that. It's not like we should bring it to court and try to say that doll deserves to be free. That's not the case here. The thing is the internal thought process that's going on. You are projecting hate. You're projecting murder upon that's coming out of you, and it's on you. It's not about protecting that person. It's about just protecting yourself. In the Bible, it says, if you hate somebody, you've murdered them in your heart. If you look upon a woman with lust, you've committed adultery. That's the concept that I feel justifies that the morality that was presented in that show. And he was wrong, because he's projecting his hatred outwards upon them.
Yeah.
And he was wrong for doing that, and he's wrong for practicing such malicious thoughts that'll eventually probably destroy him. Probably already has destroyed him internally.
Yeah. Regardless of whether or not they had consciousness in some sort. And I thought that was like a very interesting perspective. It was very conflicting for me, because I'm already like the type of person, for example, who I loved playing Pokemon growing up, and I treated my Pokemon as if they were like real. And I know that they were just data in my Nintendo DSi. But if my Espeon, which is my favorite Pokemon, would die, I would turn off the game instantly, because they had feelings in the game, stuff like that. So I'd literally treat it like, it's a real thing. So when I'd watch this, I'm like, this is kind of conflicting, because, they're not real. They're like clones, but like data. But then at the same time, not really. And it was just very confusing in that sense. If they had consciousness, and that means that they're able to operate on their own even while the game system is not really in run. And if they don't have consciousness, then that means that they pretty much are just a part of the game, and like every decision that they make, they pretty much like don't really have like free will to like think on their own. But regardless, just as like what you explained, the person inflicting that damage on them, they're wrong for it, because that's how that's how they're operating. Like they're being malicious in that way, and then it'll destroy them in the end. So the next person in the INTP car is SI, introverted sensing, also known as memory. And the way that I define memory is,
he doesn't remember, so I have to look it up.
Concerned with details, what is tried and true and reliable. Sorry, I'm going to have to restart that. Let me put this on, do not disturb. Concerned with details, what is tried and true and reliable. This function stores details of concrete experiences or facts to reference and potentially replicate or even relive later on in the future. A person who uses this function allows their own or others' experiences to bring light to their own identity. SI provides the individual the ability to be in tune with their own internal physical state, such as heightened sensitivity to fluctuation of health, hunger, and other inner body sensations. People who use this function are also often the types to also notice when things have been shifted or changed. They can seem rigid and nitpicky. So, Brandon has this as his 10-year-old, his tertiary function. 10-year-old is still, like pretty smart, says some cool things every now and then, but it's not an adult. You don't want it to drive the car. So even though he has a good relationship with it, it's still not like that strong like how it would be for Monica, who's an ISTJ and has it like as her dominant function. This always comes with exploration. So Monica actually has exploration as her last function, which we know, like, whenever you bring up philosophy or like, a whole bunch of like abstract things, and she's like, okay, so next.
I almost lost her on the first date with that.
Yeah, that was, you told me about
Yeah.
that. That was funny. I love how Heidi like explained, what SI is. SI is pretty much seeing like stepping stones and seeing people take stepping stones over and over and over again and keeping record of which ones work the best, what has always been tried and true, what has always worked. Then you automatically like know like which route to take that's best, the one that's most reliable. And then NE exploration is being like based off of what we already know to be tried and true. What other ones can we venture off to and kind of like leave that comfort zone? And so with Brandon, he more kind of like does the reverse than what Monica would do. Like Monica would probably be the one to like watch like all of the stepping stones, everything. Okay, Brandon, so these are the ones we have to take. And then you might be like, oh, well, why don't we try and take these? And she's like, no, why would we do that? This has always worked. Why should we change everything? Like, we can be sure that this is going to work. It's like, oh, but that's not really any fun, which is probably what you would say. And so forth. And that's why they kind of be like held as like the traditionalists. However, when Brandon having like SI as his tertiary, his 10-year-old, when he has now explored certain territory, then he's able to keep that record, that data in his SI. So now he's able to also just, like you were saying, you add that to your repertoire, like you were saying like earlier, and that helps a lot when it comes to like knowing like like certain information, like what is tried and true, and like what is the established thing, what is the most reliable thing for right now, but then also how can we bring that even further, how can we change how can we reinvent the wheel in a way, what more can be explored here rather than the same very mundane thing over and over and over again.
I don't know, with my limited understanding of memory, if this would qualify, but like I have a lot of routines in my life that I do try to keep, and yes, I do like changing them up every once in a while, but I was like, okay, this works and this is working well for me, I'm going to try to keep this routine. A lot of my diet is probably the biggest one. I have a consistent grocery bill, I have a consistent plan that I mean, you notice I pretty much cook the same things. Like I have a different,
you have something to fall back into that's comfortable for you.
Yeah, I mean, I do like I will try things, but like for the most, and I do have a little diversity in my menu, but it's a cycle, and a lot of times I like staying in that because it works, so it's accurate.
Yeah, and that makes total sense because SI or memory is also like I said, every function has so many faces to it, but SI memory also is about like like what is reliable, and what am I used to, what have I experienced. People who have SIs like a dominance like Monica, for example, they can't really understand something that they have not really experienced. And then once they've experienced, that's why they're usually like really good at like the perfectionist thing, because then they do the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, and so now they just get better and better and better and better at it. But then that kind of like they become comfortable with that, and then they don't want to leave their comfort zone, NE, so that they can like explore something new, because they may not be as good with that, or it may not work and they don't really like the idea of it not working, stuff like that. So if you want something to always work, pretty much, then you can go to somebody with high memory. But if you want to like explore that new territory, then high NE. But even then you still have like Brandon said, like he still has like some kind of like routine and something to like pretty much fall into and like rest into. And that also, like, yeah, the traditionalist side, like, we know an INTP who's actually, like, seemingly very traditionalist. And if we're looking at the MBTI scale, that would be because he has not really gotten enough into his NE. It's still enough to where like you can see like, okay, yeah, this person is using NE. He's using like exploration, but he's kind of using it as like a one trick pony where it's like, oh, like I'm doing like maybe like screenwriting, stuff like that. But you can tell like their narratives, their pool of narratives, the information they haven't really experienced enough to be able to allow their accuracy to be able to scrutinize in that way. But instead, they're just really stuck in that TISI loop, where they're already stuck in what they already know, and they're kind of judging the world based off of that, as opposed to like being in a more perceptive process to be able to understand things more clearly. And the way that you can usually like get out of this is like kind of like you said that you travel a lot and you try to learn a lot and you talk to like a whole bunch of different people, not necessarily to correct them, but to understand like where they're coming from. And that's when you now are able to add to your repertoire. And lastly, Brandon's 3-year-old function, inferior function, is extroverted feeling, which is coincidentally my driver function. And so that one I defined as concerned with social dynamics, how we emotionally affect one another, and creating harmony by meeting people's needs. Intuitively knows the exact buttons to push in the exact order to get a desired emotional reaction from an individual or group. Extremely diplomatic, in tune with others' feelings, and makes decisions based on what is best for the group, putting his or her own personal feelings in the back seat. People who have this function can appear overly friendly, and spineless. No, but seriously, like, yeah, when harmony is a strength, when it's like strong, and I actually just recently put out a video like harmony or FE, a healthy and well developed FE is much more than just people pleasing. When it's a strength, it's literally looking at societies and people, like structuring society in a way that'll get everybody's needs met, understanding the social norms and the culture of a room. Once a harmony person walks into a room, they can instantly see the way that everybody is interconnected, the hierarchy, like, okay, that person's the most popular, everyone listens to that person. That person's a little bit weird. Like, if you're talking about like reading people, harmony is pretty much like that. Like, it understands like the social dynamic, all of the interconnections and lines, like, oh, that person likes that person. Oh, and this person must be this. Oh, in this type of environment, I should behave this way. Stuff like that. Now, when it's an inferior function, it's clearly not as sophisticated, just like, for me, my accuracy is not nearly as sophisticated as Brandon's. However, you still have a very good relationship with it when you are developed, especially in your auxiliary, because I always say that your auxiliary function is the one that you feed, and then as you feed it, then scraps fall from the spoon or whatever, and then it feeds the dog, which is your inferior function. So then it also grows at the same time. As an inferior function, even if it may not be as sophisticated as it would be for like an INFJ, ISFJ, ENFJ, ESFJ, it's still pretty good. I've seen Brandon really, he's clearly like a very kind person. I know a lot of INTPs who you can usually tell that they don't really have a good relationship with their FE because they lack tact. The biggest way for me to be able to tell that, oh, you're like, yeah, you need to work on your FE is like, not just because they may not understand like, the social dynamics of a room or something, but when they're giving their TI truths, they do not even care how it's going to be received. And that's usually a problem. I made a whole video on how like we should be using tact and everything. In the same way, like reverse, like an FE user, you can tell like when they're not really like into their TI because they don't want to say the truth, because they feel like it's gonna ruffle feathers.
It makes me think of back when I was like in middle school or high school when I had a crush on somebody. Those are the ones, and I would be one to try to be super friendly, meet the needs, make sure everything everything I'm saying is coming across as nice and stuff. Because that's kind of that's a more immature thing to do. You completely disregard everyone else around you, and you use that friendliness to focus on, somebody who makes your butterflies tingle or whatever, something like that. It made me think kind of like of that, because I grew up a lot with that. Like, I didn't care how I treated really anybody at all. But as soon as somebody I liked came into the picture, yeah, I'm gonna exercise that 3-year-old function.
That's wow, yeah, no, that I think that's a really good example. Because for INTPs, usually like when they do care enough about the person, that's when they'll like they'll pull on their FE to be able to like use on that, because it takes a lot of energy for them usually to like really use their FE like a lot to like cater to the needs and everything. And even now, like with Monica, like the way that I see how you treat her, it's so lovely. Like, sorry woman, but he is taken, and he's engaged and all of that, but he's such an incredible fiance. Like you'll invite her over like for to like make her breakfast in the mornings and stuff like that, and you just treat her like so sweetly, and I like that's I mean, you could always like, that's human or everything, but like the way that you meet her needs, like I see that as like a very like harmony type of thing.
Right.
And even the way that like you sometimes like deal with when we're with your group of friends and everything. The last time recently when we were with them, I was more quiet, and I was just like like observing, and I didn't really like engage like too much. Because I didn't feel a need to, I don't always like, even though I'm an FE Dom, like I only try to like take control of social dynamics like when I feel like it's necessary. But everybody was getting along, everybody was talking, and it wasn't my group of friends, and so I didn't really feel like necessary. But I saw that you were really good with like facilitating like who like people being heard, and stuff like that. And I was like, wow, this is really good usage of FE.
I feel like INTP, it's a kind of an INTP thing where a lot of it this is part of our accuracy function. We have to give a disclaimer. My disclaimer, like right now that I've been thinking about the whole video, is I kind of want to say, I personally am going to watch back in this video multiple times, I'm sure, and I'm going to say, oh, wow, I screwed everything up. I probably should have said this, should have said that. Everybody probably thinks I'm the craziest person alive. And if you already think that, then congratulations, so do I. It's really cool. I always give a disclaimer because that's part of accuracy. Because if I don't, I'm going to be totally honest, if I don't have the full answer, if I don't have the, if I feel that what I'm going to say, people are going to come back to me and say, well, you're wrong about this, or well, have you considered this? I give a disclaimer. I like to give a disclaimer is like, I can't cover everything. I'm not going to be able to, my research might be a little out of date. Yeah, kind of something like that. I want people to understand I'm not oblivious to this. I recognize that I might have missed something, or I might be, there might be a side of something I said that was, inaccurate, and, let me know about it. But I can't stand when people come up to me, it's like, no, you're wrong about this, so take a look at this, boom. Like, shut up.
I recently saw a tweet from Twitter. It was tweeted by this person named ENFJ Sage on there, and it said, continuously working on avoiding making blanket statements, even when referring to types. Just because I do something does not mean all ENFJs may do it. And even just because I may not does not mean all ENFJs do not. It's always safest to just use myself as another stat to the bigger picture rather than represent the whole community. For example, as an ENFJ, blank, but I can't speak for them all. But also must keep in mind that there are just certain things certain types will always do when it's function-based. So even in doing this, there are exceptions. If an ESFP does not relate strongly to many or any parts of SE, well, the person is not an ESFP. It is just what it is. And then what I found interesting about that was that another ENFJ on Twitter responded saying, I don't know why, but I mostly don't mind generalizations or blanket statements as long as we still have an understanding that it isn't so black and white once we explain or delve in. And I responded, wow, LOL, the irony here is interesting. I couldn't help but notice that even in this exchange between the two of you being the same type, you both have a different opinion on blanket statements / generalizations, which I guess proves the original post right. But, head hurts. TI, infuriating. But yeah, I found I've done the same thing then I would get some who say, well, I'm blank and I don't do that. So then it's like, oh, maybe I should make it clear it's not for everyone, just 1/few sample sizes. But I agree with you, Kat. I see what you mean. Then she said, I'm honestly too lazy to put a disclaimer. Mind you, this is an ENFJ. I'm honestly too lazy to put a disclaimer before everything I say. I think most people understand what I mean, and if not, I don't mind clarifying. And then I said, yeah, I totally understood. I guess I reversed that. I tried to avoid having to clarify it to begin with, but I don't think either way is right or wrong. The reason why I went through that whole exchange is because it's very interesting to me, because I always thought that the disclaimer thing was an FE thing. Like, oh, I don't want to, like, like, hurt people's feelings, or, like, FE, at least to me, especially having as, like, TI have, like, FE as a dominant, that means a TI is my last function. So when people attack my TI, like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, even, like, when I make these videos, like, the fear that you mentioned, like, I don't want people to come to me and be like, well, this is wrong. That's one of my biggest fears. Like, Denzel, this doesn't make consistent sense, and blah, blah. Oh my gosh. Like, oh my gosh, no. In fact, an INTP, shout out to you, Emma. Love you. Oh yeah, you know Emma.
I've known her for a conversation for a Facebook message.
Right, yeah. You know Emma. She was talking to me yesterday, and the way that she persuaded me was, trust me, you're going to rough up some feathers by stating this, and people may, like, riot, or, something like that. And I was like, that is the most definite way to get an ENFJ to, like, switch their, thing, because it's like, no, I don't want to, like, get the people upset or whatever. So in the same sense, with an INTP, it's very interesting, because you might be right. I mean, it makes sense. Like, regardless, it will be the FETI axis. So maybe there's some, like, layover over there, but especially coming from this ENFJ. And I'm not saying that she has bad TI or anything, but I do find it to be interesting that, like, I like to put the disclaimer first. And I thought that was, like, maybe, like, an FE thing, and then, like, TI is just, like, I don't really care. But now I'm starting to see, like, maybe it's because of my TI that I want to put that disclaimer first before I risk, like, like, people, like, attacking me, which has happened before sometimes, like, in videos. Like, I'll state something, and then, or tweets, and then, yeah, it must be a TI thing, because INTPs would come to me and be like, well, this isn't blah, blah, or have you looked at this? And, like, and I'm like, look, I mean, you guys know what I meant, and then I'd have to clarify. So now I just go ahead and, like, outsource in that way. So I think that you're right, that the disclaimer thing really is a TI thing, TIFE, but, like, mainly, like, related with TI, because you want to make it clear that, like, hey, I understand that, this isn't applicable maybe to, like, everything, but it's a general principle, something that I've identified, and, I'm open to, like, understanding if I'm wrong or whatever, as opposed to, like, just, like, making a whole blanket statement, which, like, maybe FE would be more willing to do until it gets more into that TI.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think, honestly, I can see both perspectives why a disclaimer could be relevant to both the harmony and the accuracy for different reasons. But
yeah. What's your relationship with your feelings?
We haven't talked lately. I don't know. Relationship with my feelings, I mean, I don't trust them very well. Like, I don't think that they're something, cause I don't know, feelings, I feel like, just cloud my judgment, and just like what they say in the Star Wars prequels, like, feelings cloud your judgment, and they're not your... I try to make sure if I am feeling something, it is consistent with the information that I am processing as well.
Got you.
So I'm not just making a decision based off of some,
Got you. In my NT's Low-Key Sucked video, which also coincidentally was the last time I was in this room, I recorded it over here. I think you saw the section with the INTP. Everybody thought that I was going so hard on you guys. I was like, I'm sorry, but I mean, it just...
It's facts.
Y'all can see I love Brandon a lot. So I wasn't trying to, like, actually, like, hurt his feelings or anything. But in that one, I said that like sometimes, and I see this a lot with Dexter. I mean, I only watched the first episode, but I saw it so often. I was like, yeah, he's definitely INTP, FE inferior. Where it's like you're processing in your head, like, oh, this is what humans do. Oh, it is polite to do this, blah 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 blah, and it's almost like you guys are like consciously thinking of what is expected in society and the social norms and all of that before you like make decisions, and like as you're like catering to like tact and like everything, like even as you're like when you're talking to other people, then you're like you have like some sort of like hesitation. It's almost like robotic sometimes in a way. Do you think that I'm right about that, and could you explain a little bit more behind that?
I'm gonna be totally honest, I kind of zoned out, don't I understand what you said.
No problem.
That's an INTP thing too.
I'm
and it's not like we're completely detached to the conversation, don't care. It's because we have so much going on in our mind in the background that or especially when we say things like, okay, now I need to think about that, and it's just like I can't save this for later, and we automatically go into this like try to analyze it and stuff like that. And sometimes we miss important details.
No, I feel you. I could already even tell anyway.
Yeah.
But essentially, how would you say that your relationship with like social dynamics and manners, or what is expected of you from society and humaning is?
I mean, as soon as you say what is expected of me from society, I already just it gets under my skin. I can't stand societal norms. I don't know, and it gets very controversial sometimes. Like I talk about like how I think chivalry is it's a societal norm, and don't get me wrong, I believe love and treating my fiance and treating other women respectfully is important. But like the fact that we have these specific set almost rules that we have to follow is just, I think, sometimes ridiculous. It's
Could you give some examples?
It kind of
feel free to tear them apart. I know that I'm an FE dominant or whatever,
Yeah.
but I do value TI. So, and I like to think about that. Like, so yeah.
You have to give me a moment to think about that.
Sure.
But what was I gonna say before? That's another thing. As soon as I get off the trail, then I completely lose the thought I originally had.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. It's just demonstrating how I work.
I think the last thing that I'd like to ask of you before we wrap it up is, do you have like any advice for any INTPs like out there? Like looking back, maybe even like at your 15-year-old self, like like, and then seeing where you are now, and just what you've even learned. Yeah.
We're socially awkward, right? You've said that in your videos.
Usually, yeah.
Recognizing that is clear, and because I had a lot of insecurity growing up. I've had a lot of depression growing up from that. I still have some today. I'm not going to lie about that. That the fact that we do not function well in social environments. It's hard making those relationships. It's hard being in a crowd of people and trying to engage in conversation. I mean, there are in certain conditions, like the other night, it does work well. But as soon as I found that out about myself, that it's just because we're built to function in this way, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just has, unfortunately, an unintended consequences of making us sometimes socially awkward. But don't let that get you down. Don't let that depress you. Understand that it's what makes you unique, and it's what people... It doesn't mean you have to like stay in that, because I'm trying to break out of currently of this habit where or this state of being kind of like socially deprived, and I'm trying to reach out, and Denzel can testify that I'm going out, and I've been doing a lot of things with friends and groups and stuff like that, and that's great to do that as well. But if you're really struggling, just understand that's just part of who you are, and it's nothing you should be ashamed of. And I'm still struggling with this today. Like, even though I'm saying those words, and I do believe it rationally, inside of me, it's just kind of like, wow, I suck at being a human being and around forever. I suck at being a friend. I don't have this great grand friend group. But as soon as you understand this is just kind of how you function in society, it really helps kind of like make that rational side, and it helps you understand, okay, so there is rational reasons for why this is. It's not because there's something wrong with me.
Wow. Yeah, I totally agree. And for what it's worth, I think that you're honestly really, really cool, Brandon.
Thanks.
Yeah, for sure.
My accuracy, but I might not agree with that, but
that's just me. Brandon, where can everyone find you? Like, you're a videographer. Like I said, you already made a video
Yeah.
in the past together and everything
Yeah.
about his business, so you guys can go check that out. But then also, like, what could you give us any updates about today?
Yeah. Well, I have a website. It's called infectiousproductions.net.
Check the description.
Yeah, that's basically where I have a lot of my video work. That's more for my business side, so it's the easy way to take a look at some of my work. I have a YouTube channel that's called Infection Films because originally I was Infection Films, but then to make it more professional sounding, I turned it to Infectious Productions, but my YouTube name is still Infection Films. And that's probably the easier way to go because that's where all my content, all my work and stuff like that is. A lot of my tests that I've done with like special effects and things like that, and all my video work there. I am a professional videographer, so my services are always available too. That's more, you can find that on my website. But
Yeah, and he talks about it more in the video that we
Yeah.
did as well. So like, if you guys definitely just check that out. He says a lot about it. But
yeah,
awesome, cool. Thanks everyone for watching this video. Thanks again, Brandon, for featuring in it.
No
being
problem.
The face for INTP. Albert Einstein better watch out. And done.